we go. And what I'll do is I will send this call out probably tomorrow morning, because I just need to set up the link on YouTube. But then every week I will add our call to like our own private like YouTube link, so you can always see all of the calls and kind of catch up or go over anything that you want to. Thank you so much for joining the Doula Focus. I'm always, just every time anyone asks me about it or books on, I'm just so happy, because as you know from kind of following me, I just want more of us to be successful and achieve what we want in our birth businesses, because I just think it's gonna, basically what we have to offer people is so amazing, that I just think, and you know, like if anyone's seen my stories on Instagram this week, like there's some awful stuff that is going on there and out, kind of going on in the birth world, like what families are experiencing. And I just think anything we can do is amazing, but we have to ultimately back ourselves first, or it's just not going to work. So what I thought we could do is kind of just go through everybody, and if you're happy to share, just kind of share some of the things that came up for you when you were thinking about like what you want your business and life to kind of look like, in terms of like where the balance falls, what you're doing. And then maybe what we're going to be thinking of today is, are there any kind of practical ways, that practical actions that we can put in place to start to move towards it? If that is the struggle, like what are the limiting beliefs and what is behind that? And if we need to deal with that first, like how can we look at that? So I won't share mine yet. I have kind of shared some of them on the WhatsApp group, but does anyone want to start us off with kind of what they've been thinking about, like what do they want to create in their business?
I don't mind going first.
Thank you.
So yeah, I was kind of thinking about this earlier today, and my ideal would be that I've got a really successful and in-demand hypnobirthing and birth doula business that very much has to fit around my family life. So I don't necessarily want to be fully booked all the time. I think someone else said in the group, like maybe a birth client every other month, because obviously being on call and attending birth can be quite demanding. So I think one every month would suit me quite well, and then my hypnobirthing I can do in the evening, which is perfect. But yeah, I think I really would love to be known locally. Like if there's like a local pregnant woman, I want to be the person that they think, oh yeah, I know Susie, she's in Hertfordshire, she's a hypno, like I want to be that person. But because I'm still relatively new to it all, my doubts are, why would anyone want me, because I'm like a newbie? That's my really limiting belief kind of thing. But yes, pushing that aside, that's what I would like. A business that I love, whilst not sacrificing time with the kids, because like I said in my voice note, I homeschool my 5-year-old, so I literally have a child with me 24/7. Unless my husband's home, then I can escape. But yeah, that's my priority. This is second to that, but I love it and I still want it to work.
Yeah, amazing. And I think one thing I noticed, I don't know if it was someone in this group, maybe it was, that I noticed on their Instagram, it said like trainee doula. And I was like, no, you're a doula. I was like, don't put trainee, like anyone can be a doula. And to me, it's like, I think that is something, everyone starts out like that. Everybody starts out thinking like, but what if I'm found out, and what if they realize that, and people, I think everyone still thinks like that occasionally. Have you found anything, Susie, that firstly, is there any particular scenario that kind of often causes you to have those doubts, like imposter syndrome? Is it when anything specific happens? And if it is, have you been able to like recognize it and move through it? How do you handle that kind of like, I guess, initial lack of confidence that I think we all have at certain points in time? It's universal.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about that is when I finished my doula training, the first thing that I thought was, what do I do when a client says to me, "Oh, so how many births have you been at?" And I'd say, "Oh, you'd be my first, actually." But with the first client that I actually met, potential client that I actually met, I was just really upfront with her. I said, "Look, I have only just finished my training, but that does mean that I know where to get all the latest statistics. I know where all the most up-to-date research can be found." And she went for me.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
but then off of the back of that, so I was there for that. But then kind of since then, I have done a few births, but that's what I always struggle with, is when someone goes, "Oh, so how many births have you been at?" And I end up being like, "Oh, only 3."
I know. And I think I think it's quite individual about how creative you can be with your answers, because like I totally agree that it's not something that you can lie about. But I think for the first ever birth that I supported, I said I'd been at 3 births. They were of my own children. So, but I was just like, I don't know, I phrased it in such a way, and I thought, but it was funny because it was the partner that asked me in a very conversational way after they'd hired me. So it wasn't what sealed the deal. And I think it's very rare that anybody starting out in as a doula for their first client is going to be charging what they would at 2 years down the line. And if you are, if your like initial fees to maybe get you through that mentoring period, whatever it is that you're doing, are a bit lower, then somebody's getting an absolute bargain. And if I'm honest, like I completely overgave for probably the first 10 births that I attended, where I had very few boundaries and I just offered like the most insane amount of support, extra visits, extra hospital support visits, like all sorts. And I actually look back and think, wow, they got amazing value. And my level of compassion and care was exactly the same. It wasn't like, oh, I've improved at being more compassionate. So I think it's recognizing that in terms of a doula, it is so much. And I think this is the same for any birth work. It really is about the connection to you. People are investing in you, and that is unique. And there's no like training plan to become more you. You're like you're the complete package as you are. And yeah, I feel like that it is a normal way going through, but it does often kind of strike me when I see some people's social media, and it's very clear that they're either just starting out, or maybe they say that they're just starting out, they're a trainee. And I think, I never had any of that on mine. I was always bam, like I am a doula. And if people ask me, I would say I'm being mentored, which means X, Y, and Z. Um, but it did, yeah. I found that almost helped breed my confidence if I could be like, no, I am a doula, because you actually don't, okay, you need to have a certain training if you want to be on this doula directory or that doula directory. But to be a doula is that there is no, like, anyone can be a doula. So what are going to be your practical steps, Susie? Is there anything you can kind of feel like, okay, what are my first steps that I'm going to work towards this? Because I'm going to write these down, and I'm wondering if it's going to work for other people as well, because I think they can be quite universal.
So my steps are going to be that I need to carve some time in the week for me to completely just commit myself to work, whether that's my marketing or whether that's improving my hypnobirthing course that I offer, whether
Yeah.
that's coming up with a plan of, I don't know, how I'm planning on getting more clients or anything like that. I need to be able to have a few hours in the week where I can just sit down and dedicate myself to that. So that's something that I'm going to have to work out how I can fit in.
Has anybody in the group successfully navigated that? Because it's something, if I'm honest, that I struggle with, of like deliberately setting aside time that is, I focus on one thing. It's something that I want to work on. Has anyone found any good strategies for that?
Yeah, I think so. I did Lisa's mastermind last January, and several things with her since. So I feel like I've definitely covered a lot of this ground and stuff already. Yeah. So like a lot of when I recapped on like my values and my vision and my stuff in my notes earlier, that was like going back to stuff.
Yeah.
That I did like a year ago. So that didn't just like crop up overnight.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think just in that, I was just like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just like swanning off. And I needed some space because probably like several people here, definitely like you, Jen, I left teaching and was at basically breakdown point when I left. So I definitely needed like a good year to compress into this work properly. But it was a year later when I did Micromind, and I was just like, I'm still like swanning about, like seeing friends for coffee, and then I'm going, oh, I don't know what I'm posting on Instagram, but I have managed to do this and do that. So I was just like, fuck it, like I just literally have a timetable now, like that has my exercise and everything in it as well. So it's slightly complicated now because I've upped my exercise, but
okay, yeah.
It's a fortnightly plan basically. So like on a Monday morning, I'll go to the gym. On a Monday lunchtime, I'll do my accounts. On a Monday afternoon, I'll reply to emails or whatever. Tuesday will be a sort of like free day where I can like see postnatal clients or do prep sessions or whatever. Wednesday, I teach postnatal yoga and do a run in the evening. And then, yeah, so it's like quite heavily structured.
Yeah.
And across the year, like I've had to definitely work on like being a bit gentle around that as well. So like I'm a big fan of a plan,
yeah,
but I can get quite like addicted to it and then like freak out if like it's been raining and I didn't want to go for my run or whatever. So I have had to be like actually it doesn't matter if I see a client on Monday instead of Tuesday and like swap things about. It's still flexible, but it's definitely helped to just be like, just draw a line under it and be like, I'm not doing that now. Like,
yeah,
if I was in school, I wouldn't be like, oh, sorry, I'm just going to see my friend for a coffee. Like, just because it's me running the show now, like, yeah, it was quite just a shift. But I think you have to be ready for that as well. Like, it depends what else you've got going on in your life, right? And the first year, I had too much residual trauma to deal with. And then it was the right time to start doing those things. So I think also you have to be a bit nice to yourself. Like if you're homeschooling, Susie, like I would love to do that, but I'm like, that will screw my life over too much. So I can't deal with it just yet.
Yeah. I think that's it. A schedule. Does anybody else implement like a bit of a, Wednesday afternoon is this, Friday is this? Does anyone else find that helpful?
I found that actually the busier I got, in terms of like postnatal clients, the more I was able to really have focused time, which sounds crazy because I think before, when I didn't have clients on set days, I'd think at the beginning, I'd have like a to-do list for the beginning of the week, and hardly anything got done. And I had my little girl on and off. And then before I knew it, it was the school run and it was picking up the bigger ones. But actually, when I started having like a client on a Tuesday, then knowing that I didn't have my daughter like for 3 hours afterwards either, I'd make sure that that was my time. And then with adding new postnatal clients in, like now I have a full day on a Wednesday, and I'm keeping half the day for basically like a CEO day. And then I do some household stuff on that day as well, which then takes the pressure off the other days. So weirdly, when I had not as much to do in terms of my day-to-day work, I was floundering. But actually now I've got more like structure. Real work. Yeah. Because I'd literally sit there and think, oh, I'll write an Instagram post, and 4 hours later I was like,
we've all been there. We've all been there.
What the time spent on Instagram posts is embarrassing for me anyway. What I found, I'll share my Instagram tip, is that I have found that maybe at certain times of the month, maybe it's a certain day where I'm feeling like, let's say it's like the sun is shining, I've got a few spare hours, I'll go to a park and have a coffee or something like that. I basically now split anything that's like content, whether it be like really anything actually that's kind of planning content, things like that, is I split into 2 parts. I have like the creative side where I come up with ideas, and then the producing it. And I found that this has actually massively helped. So what I might do is go somewhere, maybe for a coffee shop, park, I have a notebook, and I just kind of, I guess I start thinking of either people I know, you know, now that I've worked with a lot of clients, the clients I've worked with, and I think like, what was coming up for them? What was the main issues? What were they asking, to kind of get out of the bubble of what's in my head? And then I just come up with ideas. And I found that like, once I got one idea, it kind of, it made like, it birthed loads more ideas. And what I think I was struggling with in the past is I'd have this idea, and then I'd spend, you know, a good 20-30 minutes putting it on on Canva, that's what I use, to create a post. And then I'd just be like, oh gosh, I'm fed up of this, leave this. And I was like, I've spent this time and I've got one post to show for it, and now I'm bored of this. So what I do now is I'll get like, maybe I'll challenge myself to be like, come on, let's get like 10 ideas. And I have, I use like Google Docs. So it's on my phone, it's on my computer. And I just, if I'm scribbling it down, maybe I'll do that sometimes. And then sometimes I'll transfer it to that Google Doc. I've got really good. Sometimes I'm like, this is a really good idea. I want to share this. I've now got very good at being, I'm just going to make a note of that on my phone, because it will leave me. So what I now have is I have a document with, it's got quite a lot built up on it now, at least 10 to 20 ideas for both my memoirs of a doula stuff and my birth stuff, about here's topics I want to talk about, whether it be an update to my website, whether it be an Instagram live, a story, a post, whatever it is that you want to share in whatever medium. So I don't have to all think of the idea, that's already done. It's just like the getting it down. And I find when I split it that way, it's more manageable. So maybe that's something people could try and see if it works for them. With regards to like, that was one of my things. I always said, I want to have a whole day off a week where I'm not working, as in, I try not to work weekends anymore, but like a Monday to Friday. Now all the kids are at school. And what I was doing is saying, I'll just be completely flexible with that and let that work itself out. And we'll just see in the week, oh yes, look, like Wednesday is free this week, great. But what I was finding is because I'd not made it in any way a non-negotiable, it sneakily things got put in there. So what I've decided, actually, just literally today, I was thinking, no, this has to stop. I am getting overwhelmed and I'm like, it's too much. So I'm now decided, for me, I'm going to say Friday is I'm not working. And even if it means I have to get a bit uncomfortable and maybe, you know, this is hard for me if someone says, oh, could you do a breastfeeding home support visit? Could you do it on Friday? That is, if I was free, it would be physically painful for me to say, I'm sorry, I don't work Fridays. Like, it would be so painful for me to do that because I'm such, like, yes, I can help you, I'll be there. But now I've realized like that it will lead to resentment. If I am filling my days and they're not in exactly the way I want, at least occasionally, it's going to lead to resentment. I found this with weekends. So last year, I had a birth client that they have overstepped boundaries. It's tricky. And one of the things is that I'd said I don't really work weekends, but maybe we could do, you know, the odd session here or there. It somehow ended up that their 4 birth prep sessions were on weekends, and I was like, what have I done? And then they actually cancelled 2 of them last minute, and it really annoyed me because I was like, but this is my weekend, it's so valuable to me, and I've blocked it out for you, and that's meant that it's changed our plans as a family. But it was actually my problem, not theirs, because I'd not been firm in it, and I'd said, yeah, okay. So I've started 2024 with, I'm sorry, I don't work weekends other than attending births. Like that for me is now, oh, I'm going to just say it and I'm going to tell people. And you know what? People are absolutely fine with it. They're like, okay, fine. Like, nobody judges. If somebody tells you, if anyone tells you, like, here's my availability, do you ever kind of think, oh, how come you're not available on Thursday afternoons? Like, it's just in my head that's happening. So I think, yeah, sometimes it's finding that balance, isn't it, between where's the flexibility, because we do need a bit of it, but actually are there some areas, like for me, it's the weekends is now a non-negotiable, and I'm going to start moving into Fridays as a non-negotiable, and we'll see how that goes, because like Kim was saying, sometimes these things, it takes you time before you can like actually be like, yeah, this needs to happen now. And I think, if thinking about my limiting beliefs that have stopped that in the past, it's often been, if I don't make myself really available, they won't want to work with me. That was my limiting belief that I was holding and was affecting that. And I think it can be quite a common one in the birth world, like, especially when you're starting out. Has anyone else experienced that, where they've maybe bent over a bit too much to accommodate?
Yeah, I'm definitely still doing that. Even though what was helpful for me was like comparing it to workmen. Like, we seem to have really bad experiences with workmen, but they don't give a fuck. Like, you're literally like, this needs fixing, and they're like, well, this is the price, and we're coming at this time and this day, and they don't turn up at that time and day, and you still pay them exact same amount of money. And I was like, well, I'm like doing all this crazy stuff that maybe I didn't really want to do, and doing like Saturday lunchtimes and stuff, and nobody's like, yeah, just like,
exactly,
just because it's service based, and probably because we're women as well, like, just totally different energy. Like, they literally don't care.
I know.
Like, you can't just like walk into Tesco and be like, open the shop for me, can you? Or like, oh, I only want to pay 45p for that today, sorry, I can't really afford it, or whatever. And like, yeah, nobody else does that.
Yeah.
I'm not over it, but
imagine just being born like that. How easy would life be?
Yeah.
You know? And that is the thing. I'll share it in the group actually. This awesome book called, is it Financial Feminist? Something like that. I listened to it on audio, so I don't really ever see the title of it. Financial Feminist, maybe. And the first chapter is amazing because it really just drills it in like, wow, this is why as women are we so different in some of these aspects, like, you know, our availability, our pay, what we expect to men. And it really stood out for me. Yeah, could go on about that all night. Does anyone else want to come in with their kind of what they were, what their vision, what their kind of, when they were thinking about what they wanted their business to be, what it looked like?
I don't mind going. So actually quite similar to Susie. So I was saying like working 4 days a week, because I teach hypnobirthing and that tends to be evenings or weekends. Happy to kind of add in a little bit of that still as well. But ideally having kind of 3 days for postnatal, 1 CEO day, and then a day with my daughter. And then obviously adding in birth stuff with that. So at the moment, that isn't something that I've had to kind of plan in, but obviously thinking about my capacity, I'd love to say, well, I did say this is like my year of birth, but actually today when I was working through this, I was like, actually, what does that look like in reality? Because if 10 people knocked on your door tomorrow, you couldn't support them all. So actually, probably, yeah, like 1 every couple of months. So I said 6 and then I was like, oh, maybe 8. So that's probably like a good goal for this year, and then maybe move on for more. And then yeah, so that's kind of like how I see the week. Sorry, what was the next part?
The next bit was like, are there any things that you think actually I need to start putting this in place? Is there anything where you feel like, okay, I can see that's part of my vision for what I want to create, but I'm not in any way working towards that at the minute? Or do you feel like quite like you've got it in hand?
I think the birth side of things is definitely like, as much as I'm saying like I really want to build that side of things, I think there is still a little bit of a limiting belief around, and I think it just comes from have like this thought in my head about training so long ago and that I haven't attended that many births, and they've been really sporadic. Like the last one I attended was a year ago. So I always have this, well, I'm feeling it now actually as I'm talking about it, like this feeling of like, you know, actually quite happy to go and have a conversation with somebody about, you know, becoming their birth doula, but what on earth if they hire me, like, and it's a bit like that, even after like all this time. And I think for me, it's around, I feel like I've got lots of different plates spinning, and I've kind of let the birth, so like at the beginning I would be reading all of the birthy books and being across all of the stats, and nothing ever, unlike I used to see other people, and this is probably me doing something really naughty and comparing myself to other people, but I have other friends that are doulas that just seem to know all the stats, all the birth kind of information, that like it just reels like they can just say all these things, and I'm just like, I'm really good at the emotional side of things. But I will probably have to go away and look stuff up when it comes to birth. And I know that over time, the more birth I attended, that would become a lot easier for me. But at the moment, I've always got this like pile of birth books, and I'm like, I should read all of them.
No,
but even if I read them all, I don't think my brain would contain the information.
No.
Like I think for me, it's experience it firsthand, learn from that thing that happened in that birth, and then so yeah, for me that's the barrier. So yeah.
That I get that, because I think it is such a monumental thing. Is everybody here?
Yeah, I'm here. It just keeps cutting out.
Hey,
But I think I'm back now since I've come back. If I turn my
no
video off, it's a
worries.
bit
Yeah,
better.
sometimes if you turn your camera off, it helps, doesn't it, with the
Okay.
signal? But I was thinking, I think everybody here is hoping or attends births. That's right, is it, Katie? That's what you're wanting to do, is it?
Yeah, so I'm doing my training in March, but that is my plan, yeah, to probably similar to others, not overwhelm myself and do too many, but yeah, I would like to attend births eventually, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And this will advance, right? I'll give you some bits of my kind of how I started with being a birth doula. I never did a full doula training course. So I started out being an NCT antenatal teacher and breastfeeding counsellor in 2020. So I studied for 2 years at University of Worcester, doing a foundation degree, which was amazing. And I've used all of those skills, all of them, and I still do. But there was this Doula UK had this thing called, I think they still do it, called the alternative pathway, where if you had training in something like relevant, they were basically saying you can come on our register and basically start the process of being a mentor doula without doing a full doula training course. So that's what I did. And honestly, I feel like I actually missed out on having an immediate group of people that I could share kind of that moment with. But in terms of training, etc., I honestly don't think that it has hindered me in any way. So I think this can be a thing when you're starting out. It's like, I need this training, I need all this knowledge. Do I need to be reading a lot of books? Do I need like to know the stats? And actually, the more births I've attended, I think I've attended, so I've been a doula for just over 2 years, and I attended 8 births in my first year and 16 births last year, and I've done 1 so far this year. So that's 25. I've attended 25 births. The more births I attend, the more I realise that it's actually really quite simple. It is so much more simple than I ever anticipated. It's about being compassionate, listening, asking people just the most basic questions, but that are so important, like, how do you feel about that? Like, the amount of times I say, how do you feel about that? Is that what you want? What do you need? Like, what do you need now? It's honestly, it's those questions that I think just take people aback, because they're like, wow, somebody's like asking me what I need. And that for people, pregnant people, is so much more valuable than us knowing a load of stats, because when it comes down to it, when we're talking about birth, all of the stats, the risks are all really low for anything, and the intervention rates are all really high. Like, that's just how it's just, I actually feel like it's quite black and white with the stats. And I recently said to a client who is planning a VBAC, she was like, I'm just trying to find out what the stats are for the type of incision I have. Like, what is the risk of uterine rupture if my incision was this tight? Because I think it might have been. And basically, I just said to her, so I think the key is to work out, how would you feel if the statistic for, let's say, a regular, normal cesarean incision, the risk of uterine rupture was, I don't know, let's say 0.5%, and the risk for the incision that you had was 1%. How would you feel about a 0.5% change? Because ultimately that's what we're talking about. And she was like, oh, that's a really good point. Because, like, in the grand scheme of things, it's still small. So I've just stopped worrying too much about stats. And Claire, like you said, it's just by experience is the only way that you're going to get these. Like I've had several clients now that have had gestational diabetes. So I'm just like, well, I know that now because I've experienced it with them and I've seen what they've been through. And I honestly don't think I could have got it from a book or a podcast. I don't think it would have sunk in until I'd had that lived experience. But I think sometimes if we can just take it back to what the real simplicity of a birth doula to me is about supporting them unconditionally. And actually, we don't have any responsibility for their decisions. And to me, when I started working out and actually really working on my issues around responsibility, when I really started thinking, okay, how this birth goes is not my responsibility, that's where I started having big shifts about my own confidence. Because I've had clients that have made decisions that I would not have made, but I am at peace with that because it's like, but they're not me. So how could, it just doesn't make sense. But when I think I first started out, I found it really hard when some of the births, when you can see something unfolding and you're like, can't you see this?
Mhm.
And I was like, but this is not my path. It's not about me, it's about them. And the more births I've attended, the more I realized that no matter how much knowledge you have, no matter how much of an experienced doula you are, you cannot make decisions for somebody. And actually, we don't really want to influence people because then what if they make a decision that then they regret and they actually feel like we influence them, like as in like a little bit of the coercion, and it's like it is a massive head fuck. The whole thing is, hang on a minute, I got into this because I wanted to see women having better birth experiences, and now I'm saying actually I have no responsibility whatsoever for their experience. It's a bit like, whoa. But that has allowed me to actually take on more clients because there's been some births that have been pretty, like they're always at the beginning as well. It is like a baptism of fire for most doulas. I've been to some births that were very, very long, very exhausting, really didn't have the outcome that the family wanted. They made me ill. And if I had kept up this idea that what could I have done to have changed that, I wouldn't be here now. I just wouldn't. But I think it's working through that. The only way that we can discover that as doulas is having those experiences. But yeah, I think it can be a lot more simple. And thinking back to, I guess, like the original doulas, they were just like wise women. They didn't have qualifications and certificates and all that. They were just kind of passionate about their field of knowledge, and that was that.
I think with that stats thing as well, Claire, like we were talking about this in hypnobirthing at the weekend, like I think when it's useful, like maybe what I say to people in hypnobirthing is like, what do you think the rate is for cesareans in Bristol? And they're like 5%, and you're like, yeah, think 50. So that's like when it's useful, I think, like showing people the difference, and they're told they're high risk. So they think there's like a 50% chance of stillbirth, and you're like, well, it's less than 1%. That's when it's useful. Like they don't actually need to know it's like 1 in 32,567 or whatever. Like it's just, I think, useful to give people a bit of perspective and get them to just question what their assumptions might be, rather than actually having to know all of the ins and outs straight off the bat. And if they really want to know that, like you can send them away and signpost them onto like useful websites or whatever. But actually just like getting them to go, oh yeah, it's wildly different to what I'd assumed, is useful.
Yeah. Katie, how about you? So you've got your doula training coming up. How does that fit in to your kind of your long term, what you want from your business and where you are now? Does it feel a bit like, well, that's on the horizon and you can't really do much until then? Because I know it can feel like that when you've got kind of things coming up in the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to everyone because I'm at quite a different stage in my journey, I guess, than lots of you. So at the moment, I'm working like 3 days a week, and then the other days I have my kids. So yeah, it's quite full on. And then I'm trying, I'm doing my hypnobirthing business around that as well. So in the evenings and weekends. And my reason for wanting to move more into the doula space is so that I can ultimately leave my job and have more of a kind of flexible work-life balance. But I think there are things, so I was just thinking about that then when you were talking about what steps we can take. I think there are steps that I can start to take. So I've booked onto my training, so I'm doing that in about 6 weeks, which I'm really, really looking forward to. I'm going to start, I have obviously done some networking for hypnobirthing, but I think there's much more of that I can start to do so I can get to know people around me. And I'm starting to work more on I've focused quite a lot on Instagram recently, and I'm starting to try and work more on my website as well. Yeah. And I think just trying to get myself known as somebody that knows about birth and somebody that, you know, is known in the community. I do pregnancy relaxation classes and things like that, so that my face is out there and my knowledge is out there, so that when I kind of announced that when I announce in the future, hopefully later in the year, that I'm a qualified doula, I'm going to start taking on birth work and postnatal work. Hopefully I've got kind of a base of people there that can start then kind of talking about me, if that makes sense. I think there are, although I'm not actually going to be able to go out and take on work now, I think there's stuff I can start to lay those foundations.
You started building that network and creating it. Do you feel like there's anything else you could be doing with the network? Like, do you have any more plans for like maybe people to contact, people to get in touch with, like other birth workers locally?
Yeah, I suppose what I have, so my focus as a hypnobirthing teacher has been kind of pregnancy yoga teachers and people that can that are in the same stage of the pregnancy kind of journey as me, that are looking for the same people. I suppose I've got some doula contacts, but I haven't made loads of doula contacts because I don't know, I just haven't naturally come across them that much. So I think actually
I'd really recommend it.
Doulas would be a good idea, yeah.
I'd honestly really recommend it. I had in my area there are some kind of very well-established doulas. Maybe they don't actually work so much now. And I honestly felt like they were quite like motherly figures to me. And they were very much like, oh, I've got this inquiry. It's a bit too much for me. Would you like it? And I'm like, yeah. And then I had a friend that was like, oh, the only births I've had so far have just been through like people, you know, that like you or so and so. And I'm like, isn't that great? Like, imagine a business where you actually don't need to put yourself out there because you've built, you essentially, people know you and like, oh, you could work with this client. I was like, don't see it as any way negative, but I think often doulas, let's say they have an inquiry and they can't make it and they know, oh, there's a new doula in the area. What I've experienced is that people maybe will pass on inquiries to you. So I recommend being proactive, and it's something that I continue to do. So at the minute I'm reaching out to more independent midwives. So that's something I'm working on at the minute. And it's proved really kind of great so far. So I'm kind of continuing with that. But I think there is, and it sounds like you have been doing a lot in the background, and that there is a lot you can do for sure. And it will be so great doing that training, because I just think everybody loves their training. Like I said, it's the one thing that I was like, oh, I wish I'd done training to just have that like amazing bonds, because it's quite intensive, isn't it, when you do the doula training like that? Who are you doing it with, Katie?
So I'm doing it with Nurturing Birth. So I'm doing one of their intensive courses in Clapham. So literally like 10 minutes away on the train from me. So that's probably the bit that I'm looking forward to most, is having that group of people going through the same journey. Like, I think that there'll be loads that I learn from it, obviously, but yeah, having the group of people and that experience is, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, amazing.
That's who I trained with.
Oh, is it? Oh, amazing.
4-day intensive. It's amazing.
Those seem really good. Tilly, how about you? What came up for you when you did the pre-work?
Yeah, so I think quite similar actually. So at the moment, well, a bit similar also to Katie. So I work 3 days a week in a different school, in that I see therapy clients when sort of within the 3 days that I'm working. So at the moment, I've supported one postnatal client, and I've just been able to sort of fit her into my normal working day and then make up my working hours at other times.
Right.
So my plan is, what I'd really like is to be able to be doing 3 days a week as a doula, or 3 to 4 days a week as a doula. The other 2 days a week, I look after my daughter, and then my son's in school, so I do the school run. So it's literally, I think, swapping the 9 to 5 that I've lost passion in, and being able to swap it with the doula life. And I was thinking, so in numbers wise, I was similar 8 birth clients that would allow a bit of flexibility and not being so. I've only had one client, and I was so on edge on the on-call period, and I'm hoping that you do chill out eventually.
Completely.
But I thought 8 would be enough that I could then breathe within the other few months.
Yeah.
Everyone says you do, so hopefully, and then also having postnatal clients, but focusing mainly on postnatal clients from my birth clients, and then having room for a bit of additional postnatal clients inquiries that come through. And I'd also like to earn enough income that I could then offer some doula sessions from people from low income backgrounds.
Yeah.
I actually did the Happy Baby community course that I'm somehow registered, but I think it's sort of going through at the moment. So being able to offer, I don't know, 2 births a year that I could do it for a low income, because I was actually earning money through private clients, would be quite nice. And then stepwise, I was just thinking, like, I think before I had the first client, I think I was putting myself out there a bit more in terms of like contacting lots of people and signing up to everything. And I think something I've had 2 inquiries for this year that I've, like a March client and a June, who I've just booked, but I feel like I now don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I feel stuck because I don't want to be overwhelmed, but at the same time I do want more clients. But it has to fit in within, like, my limitations in terms of my family. So that's a bit tricky. But I think one thing I've just taken from that was even just networking again, because actually one of these clients came from a doula I met before I trained, and she just happened to live in the area, and she's like, oh, let's meet for coffee. And I was like, oh, how lovely. She was so generous of her time, and we've met up loads since then. And she was like, oh, I can't do this March client, are you available so I can pass your details on? And when the lady called, she's like, oh yeah, Alex told me that you're a great doula in the area. And I was like, why did she say that? She doesn't know that. I've only had one client. So yeah, just a bit more sort of networking and being a bit more confident when inquiries come through. I think that's sort of where I'm at now. And then trying to, so on a Tuesday, randomly, my daughter naps from 12 to 1:30 quite consistently. So that's been like my admin day of a bit more like just having a look on my website and making sure it is half decent. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
And I think that's it. Sometimes we can kind of put in an initial spurt of energy, and then just be like, and now what?
Now what?
And that is hard. And I think I found this. So I had a bit of an example that really kind of works with this. Is I don't know why I just had this flurry last year of being like, I'm going to get known, like, in the media. And I just had this very quite surreal series of events where I joined, there's this group called Lightbulb, and it's like a Facebook group, and it's press and entrepreneurs, and it's basically like mutually beneficial. So the press are looking for a certain story, and someone was like, I'll do a piece on that if you mention my business. And then there'll be entrepreneurs or anyone that's like self-employed basically that are like, here's the pitch, I've got this really weird, quirky, interesting story, who wants to cover it? And it's like that. So I had through there, I basically had in a magazine, 2 magazines, a story about me, and it was somebody was saying like they want a story of women that have had a real like big career and life change. And it's like, well, I was a police officer and now I'm a doula, so that's a pretty good one. And it was in a magazine, and then I had this opportunity to film with MTV Teen Mom. That was a really good experience. It didn't make the final cut, but I got paid for it, and the experience was amazing. And I think I put something else out there and it didn't get a response, and then I was like, I'll just leave that for now. And now I'm thinking, you know what, when I was doing that, it gave me such a buzz, it gave me such a like, I don't know, an energy, and I'm like, why haven't I done that for a while? And I think this is just life, that it's hard for us to spin like 100 plates at once. But what I'm going to try and do, and this is something I said that I do ages ago and I haven't done it, I'm like, as well as having, we've been talking a lot about like weekly, so on, you know, every week we're going to try and carve out these bits of time to do these things. What I want also is like a monthly list of like every month I want to fit in, and I want to have, for me personally, I know this might not suit others, but I want to have a few hours every month where I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to go on this light bulb group, I'm going to pitch some, you know, something about, I don't know, the NHS birth statistics or whatever. I'm going to contact my local newspaper. I'm going to contact like a local radio station, and I'm going to spend just maybe 30 minutes or maybe like an hour a month doing things that are like big level. Now, it may be that there's 3 months in a row that it doesn't get any clicks. But from what I've experienced, that one time it does, it is a massive, for me, it just felt like I'd put a lot of energy out there. It got a lot of interest. And I just felt like the energy was good. And even though it's like, well, did I get any direct work of as a result of that magazine article? Maybe not, but equally, I honestly feel like in terms of like, this is kind of the hippie woo-woo stuff, in terms of energy, like I created a lot of energy for myself and I put it out there. And I believe that has come back to me in other ways. I don't quite know, like, oh, that energy out there meant that you got this. I don't know the ins and outs, but I do believe that it's like no energy is wasted, no time that we put into things. I think it will come back. And you just have to kind of trust, because I don't think we always know exactly what it's going to look like when it comes back to us, or how it's going to look like, or when it's going to happen. But I honestly believe that the reason that I've gone from, you know, in 2 years of being a doula to being fully booked is that it's probably a personality, definitely could be considered as a personality like fault, but I'm very persistent with kind of certain things. And instead of making it into like, oh, this is not a great thing, this like OCD thing, I've kind of turned it into a bit of a superpower. And it's like latching on, everyone will all have different ones that work for us. And it's like, actually, how can I use that little thing that's a bit annoying about me, that I'm like a little bit, how can I use that to my advantage? How can I translate that into putting some energy out there into the world? So maybe that could be another thing, Tilly, to like put on have a monthly list and be like, each month I'm going to contact, I don't know, 3 new people in the birth world that are local to me. And then I think over time, you will see stuff come back from it. And worst case scenario, what have you got to lose? And I think that's where something like a monthly or even quarterly plan can be helpful, because these are the kinds of things that you can't physically fit all these different things into a week. So it's like maybe zoom back a bit and be, okay, could I have, like, could I maybe do this monthly or every other month or every kind of quarter? When I get my list together, which I'm going to try and do this week, I'm going to share it with you just to give like some ideas of the kind of things that I'm going to be. These are going to be my monthly things, and I'm going to have some quarterly things as well. Because I don't know about you, but I find that if I've said to myself, right, I'm going to do that once a quarter, then it will actually free up space in my head, and it won't be like, oh, I'm not going to give myself a hard time for not doing it every week, because I'm like, I'm just going to do that like once a quarter, and then it's occupying less space in my head. Clark, are you able to speak? Is there anything you want to share with us?
Yes, I am able to speak. Yeah, I put a short message in the thing to Claire saying, Claire, you're not playing to your strength, which probably she might have read that and thought, like, a bit rude, isn't it? Well, I don't mean it like that. I just mean, yeah, like talking about kind of, you know, I've been doing this for 10 years now, and there's a lot of kind of like, am I qualified enough? Like, what are they? Oh, are they hiring me? Like, what do they think about me? And, you know, and it's just kind of like, they're being a doula, they're hiring you because you are you. You know, it is about that connection. Whatever strength it is, whether it's hypnobirthing, whether it's this, whether it's that, it's about it. It is about that, but it's also about you as a person. You're not going to fit everyone, and trust me, you do not want to fit everybody, because if you're gonna be like, oh, I really want support feedbacks or home births or, you know, this, that and the other, you are going to wipe yourself out so fast. You're not going to be around next year. So yeah, I think really just honing in on kind of really the client you want to be working with, and really kind of the whole boundary thing as well. To put a bit of like background story in is, yeah, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I worked quite a bit with both hospital births and home births, and it got to the point where I was like, okay, you know, I'm really preferring home births right now. I'm not liking hospital births at all. They're just not working for me. So then I said, I'm not working with hospital birth clients anymore. And then kind of like the kind of attitude and vibe of, I'm in Kent, by the way, of like home birth midwives really just kind of ramped up. And I thought, I'm getting to the point where I'm not even liking home births anymore. What am I going to do? Like, what can I do? And I'd attended a few free births, but I kind of think, again, I was in that space of like, is there going to be enough though? Like, and I just thought, but there will be enough. And do I want to continue earning money where I know that I've been in births that I really didn't want to be at or was treated badly? Like, no, I fucking well do not. Like, it's got to stop. And so now, for the past 2-ish years, I've only attended free births. And oh my God, I cannot tell you, like, what a difference that has made. And people do put, it's almost like they do hire you, and the responsibility of their birth is on you. Like, if I have a doula, it'll be okay. Like, what are you going to do to stop this happening to me. And it's like, I'm not doing nothing.
Yeah.
This is on you.
Mhm.
What are you? Because I can say, you know what, this is her preference, but they're not going to listen to me, and they shouldn't listen to me. It's about you. It's about the questions you ask. It's your body. And yeah, I cannot just tell you about listening to yourself. I really can't.
Mm.
And looking after yourself.
And how did you find, Clark, that took you, kind of thinking back to when you first started? Have you seen like this evolution in trusting yourself more in terms of like intuition and things like that?
In clients, or?
Yeah, in the clients that you work with, have you found it's got easier with time, where you can just be like, I don't know, work it out more?
Yeah, I specifically, I'm known now in this area for only working with free births.
Mhm.
I go to a couple of like birth circles, and most of them are people who birth at home or free births, but there's a few kind of like midwives there, independent midwives, and I just say how it is. I just say I just attend free births because and the
that's
right
what works
people
for
will come
you.
to you. Yeah, the right people will come to you.
Yeah.
They will.
Yeah.
But I understand. I can see how, you know, wanting to kind of be able to fit everybody.
Yeah.
But you can't.
No.
You actually can't.
It's really interesting, the kind of home birth versus, well, not versus hospital, but I've had such a strange set of kind of experiences where there was a point where I was like, I've certainly said to myself that there's a certain hospital like Birmingham Women's. I've been in there twice and it was awful. Like the tension in the air was palpable, and it was awful. I was like, I'm not attending a birth here. But the challenge is that they have quite a good home birth team. It's like, you know, where you have the standalone home birth teams, they have that, and it's kind of attached to that hospital. Right, so it's a bit tricky, but it's so interesting because I've had a few clients that on paper are like my dream client. They're like, I want a home birth. I'm really like, but let's say they seem very wise to what's going on within the system. They're really, really kind of passionate about what they want. And maybe I have sensed something, and maybe this is something that's going to grow with time. I've sensed something like, and I think it's been that I think that they've been holding back, or I think that they've got fears that they are repressing, that they're not willing to deal with. And it's so interesting because there's been several births that have been like home births, potential free births, where in the end, my clients there was one occasion where this obstetrician was awful and basically just offered her a cesarean for 2 days later than, like, it was like a Wednesday, and he said, I can book you in for a cesarean on Friday. And I almost smirked thinking, what is he on about? And she just said, yes, okay. And I was absolutely like, what is going on here? And she was a very, very, very complex person. And I think that looking back, there were telltale signs, but it's one of those. I think it's like it's, and I feel like I'm still really in this space of working out like what are going to be, you know, how exactly am I going to know who my ideal client is? Because interestingly, I've had some clients that are planning hospital births, and we've had such an amazing like connection, and they've actually been very, very smooth births. Like some of them have been BBAs. And it actually turns out they'd done so much inner work that when it came to it, they decided to stay at home. And it was like, wow, like, it's so every now and then when I have a really bad experience in a hospital, which is pretty much every time I go into hospital, I see things that I'm like, why is this happening? I kind of think, I don't want to be here. And then I'll have a home birth client that I think maybe it's one of those, it's kind of like the whole baptism of fire thing, where the first few clients I've had that were planned home births, it all went tits up. for I wasn't really sure what was going on, and that was, it just really interesting. But I think this is taking time and knowing actually that for this to be sustainable, it's about us working out, it is at the priority is what works for us, because if it's no longer working for us, if you'd continued to, if you had been like, well, I'll take a few hospital births here and there, that could have meant that actually you'd just been ground down and you left being this world, and then it benefits no one, because you can't support the families. So
I just got to a point where I just wanted to kind of like know that when I was going to work, even though I don't really look at it like that, I really do enjoy it. Like, it is kind of a hobby for me, because I just love it so much. But I only do that, I only love it so much all the time because I put boundaries in place. I wanted to know that the births that I was going to go to, I was going to like. That's basically it. And I thought, if I'm gonna be at a hospital birth or whatever, great, my bank balance went up, but I was starting to like not enjoy spending that money because I had witnessed X, Y, and Z, and I just thought, I just don't want to. I just don't. It just doesn't.
Good for you. Like, good for you. Like, why shouldn't you do something that you really want to do?
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Just yeah, it really is just about taking note and just kind of like, okay. And we're not selling a particular product here. Babies are born all the time. And maternity services are doing digging their own hole, really. So it's kind of, anyway.
It's, I don't know, I feel like, is it getting worse and worse? Well, we know it is because of the statistics, because every year, like, in terms of, let's look at like spontaneous, where labour starts spontaneous, that is dwindling every year. And it's this balance, isn't it, of kind of protecting ourselves, and kind of, there's a lot of birth workers that see themselves as birth activists as well. And I think it can be really easy to fall into feeling quite angry at the system. And obviously, Clark, you took I guess, almost like the most simple step of being, I'll just remove myself from the system.
Yeah, I did, because it's a lottery, as you know. Like, even if you don't go into hospital, you're at home birth. You might have like one midwife who like is great and lovely and really respectful, and you can work well as a team. You don't know you're going to get that every time.
That's right. That's right.
And then you sit with this feeling of like, oh, okay, like they want the midwives to come, okay, like we'll call them, and partner will call them, like, and then you're like, who's going to turn up though? Like,
Yeah.
am I going to have a battle on my hands? I don't want to be at work battling. I really don't. I don't want to do that. So yeah.
And I think for me, that it does come back to the responsibility. And I think in the beginning, I often felt like I said, you know, what could I have done to have changed that? And then I started realizing like that is
it's just not on you.
You could to go down that road is not in any way sustainable. But we're dealing with, you know, something that's so highly emotionally charged.
Yeah.
That I think we have to really like prioritize ourselves. And I think sometimes that is something I see in the birth world is people kind of almost over giving because it's, you know, they've got so much passion around what they're doing, but it so often ends in that person then having burnout and actually just saying, I can't do this anymore. It happens so often.
Yeah, it does.
So Clark, is there anywhere like with what you're doing, do you feel like you're in a really good place at the minute where you're happy with what you want? When you think of how you want your kind of life to look, do you feel like it's there, or are there things that you want to bring in that you want to leave behind?
I think I'm here because I don't know the answer to that question. And so yeah, I'm just kind of like, I'm like seeing if like anything that's said, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that doesn't work for me either, actually. Nothing really like pops up for me. I know that I want to drive, I said earlier that I'm also a placenta specialist, so I really want to drive that this year, because in the past I've done it a bit outside of doulaing and I've offered it to all my clients, but I would like to get to a place where I can do that on its own. I don't need to have a birth plan to do that. And that isn't a place that I've been in before. So that's something that I really want to drive in this year. But I'm more kind of like, I've just been following you for a while, and you were talking about, which another thing is really important as well, about money, and about how like you don't decide what's people can afford or not, you know, and it's so like simple. Like when you say it like that, it's like, well, yeah, you know, like and yeah, coming out, I don't know like if every kind of like doula coursing does this, but I get a feeling that a lot of them kind of like say, oh, a doula normally charges around this, and that's kind of like what they go to. And it's like, okay, that's a guide, fine, but it's like people's time is like worth so much more than that. Like, what is it worth to you? Like, you know, that sort of thing. And so yeah, I just like the way that you spoke, really, and I just thought, yeah, I don't know what it is that I'm going to learn, but I'm probably going to get something out of it.
But there's something there. There's like some inquisitive part of you that to me is like says that you're maybe very in tune with your instincts and be like, there's something that needs uncovering. You don't know what it is yet,
yeah,
but
I haven't.
it will come out. Who knows?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, I think the thing with the affordability for me, another really good example that I think makes it very simple is if somebody says, look, I'm not gonna, let's say, so my standard doula package is £2,000. And I have had people say to me, I want my offering to be affordable. Like I'm not going to charge that, which is absolutely fine by me. It is none of my business what anyone else charges. But one thing I would always ask is like, okay, so let's say your standard doula package is, you know, standard is like, what does that even mean? Let's say your doula offering, like the one that is taken up the most, what seems to work for you is £1,000 because you want to make it more affordable. What happens if somebody that actually is very wealthy decides to hire you? Like, are you going to say no to them because your offering is really for people that can just about afford you? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
And this to me is the question that I always come back to when people say I couldn't charge that much because I want to be more accessible. It's like, then are you screening people? Are you means testing them to see if you decide whether they fit the bill? And I'm like, well, no, people aren't going to do that, are they? I know some people offer something where if people are on benefits, they have a lower rate. But for me, I personally haven't. What I'm doing at the minute is I have a pot that I'm building up that's going to have a certain amount in, you know, ideally £2,000. And then once a year, I'm going to say I'm offering like essentially a funded place. I'm not quite sure of how it's going to work yet in terms of how do I get that client. I think I'm going to have to work in partnership with somebody else or something else. But yeah, but it's different for everyone, isn't it?
So do you mean like you've got a pot in terms of like your client pays you and then they could sort of like donate you a bit more money if they want to, and that goes into the pot, or when you get paid you put some of that into the pot?
When I get paid,
okay,
I'm putting some to one side to be like, I want to have flexibility where I could maybe do something and be adaptive, but it's actually then I guess I can essentially pay myself with this side pot.
That makes sense.
One of the ways that I'm working on it, and I'm seeing how it's going to work and how it's going to play out. And it's really tricky because, again, this whole concept of afford, when somebody says, you know, I had a very tricky postnatal client in my first year that had said they were going to work with me for this amount of time, and I had very few boundaries in place, and I basically said to them, like, well, they bartered with me, and
it always leaves a sour taste.
Always. I would never. It was the first time and the last time. And basically they said, look, we're going to give you this many hours a month. And it was like a good earner. It was just down the road from me. It was more, if I'm honest, a bit more like a nanny, but I was very close to the baby. And I thought, I can make this work. This is going to be great. And then they basically cut the contract short, quite substantially short, and said, we can't afford you anymore. But these people, it wasn't that and this is where I then started to have a lot of issues, because I felt really a lot of judgment towards them, because they lived in a mansion, like an absolute 8-bed mansion. They were having deliveries from Fortnum and Mason all the time. And I thought, never again am I going to lower my price for somebody, because what it's meant is it's meant that I'm now feeling resentment towards them. It's just going to be really simple. This is the rate that I'm asking for, and it's either going to work for you or it isn't. And if it doesn't, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, there's so much. And what we're going to do, so we're going to next week, I'd really like to focus on thinking on a bit more about boundaries in not just in work, but in life. And then I think also we'll have another session on money stuff. But let's finish. So we've just got 5 minutes left. I was wondering in the chat if people want to share like what their strongest, if they've got one, like limiting belief or hurdle is at the minute. A few of them have been mentioned throughout the call, because what I want to do is during the week, I'm going to share a bit of a somatic exercise with people. And then we might do it at the start of the call next time, I've done a bit of work in somatics, a program that I'm doing. It's American, but I'm actually, I don't know why I said that in a, why should that mean it's bad, but this American thing, and I've actually, it's uncovered so much for me, and it's this little bit of like somatic work, and I found it really valuable when kind of approaching birth work. So yeah, maybe if everyone can put a thing in the chat, if you could think of it now, kind of what's your, like a limiting belief or confidence issue that you maybe want to work on. And I'll see if I can take like a screenshot of it or something. I'm going to think on mine. Take your time. And if anyone's got any questions that have come up, feel free to just go ask them now. Kim's fired it out. Really, like, obviously the common theme is coming out. I just want to let you know, like, most people probably would have heard of Sally Ann Beresford. She's like a very well-known doula, publishes books. She lives 20 minutes from me. It made me feel sick and nervous, but I've had a client that's met with me and her on at least 2 occasions, and they chose me. And it actually made me feel like I wanted to vomit, because I was like, oh my God. She's the ultimate experienced doula. But the way I see it in the end is this one client asked me, I'm just finding it really hard to choose. And I said, look, ultimately, who would you rather be in a lift with, stuck in a lift that's broken down for 24 hours? That was kind of what I said to them. Because it's about the connection. It's not about the experience. It's not about the number of births they've attended. It's about the connection. And this is where, like, there's equally been many other inquiries where they've hired another doula and they've said, I just kind of gelled better with them. And at first I found that really, really hard to hear. And now I'm like, well, yeah, because people are going to gel. Some people are going to gel better with me, and some people are going to gel better with others. I think even if, like, look at America, how many doulas they have there. They have plenty of work. They have way more work than what is kind of seen as being available for British doulas, and there's way more of them. I'm going to finish mine, which is like very meta and a bit weird. Is there one?
Just to point out as well, I had a doula for my son's birth about 5 years ago now. I was looking for a birth photographer as well, but and she just happened to be it. But I'd sort of like researched a bit about like doulas in my area, because I didn't really know. And she walked into my front door. Not into it. I opened it. She walked through. And this sounds so weird, but I could smell her, and then I just thought, she's a doula for me. That's it.
So it's not just that, it's literally down to the scent is can be.
But it was her aura.
Oh, love it.
I know. She just walked through the door,
Oh,
and I could tell she could take photography because I'd seen that, and I just thought, yeah, I already know. She didn't even have to. I spoke to her via email once or twice. Hadn't heard her voice. She opened her. She didn't even have to open her mouth. Like, I just knew.
yeah.
And I think maybe she cost like, I want to say like £2,000 or something. I would have paid £4,000.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't do anything at my birth. She just was there. But that is what.
Yeah.
That is
what
the
you
crux of
needed.
it.
Yeah.
That's what I needed. That is it.
Yeah. And that's what certificates, training, it doesn't make a difference. And to be honest with you, if I have encountered people that are very much like, I had the most bizarre interview, or not interview, I don't even call them that, like discovery call with somebody, and they had so many questions like, how many births have you attended? What's the outcome of the births? What's the how would you compare yourself to this doula, this other doula?
Well, I wouldn't.
Do you have insurance and all these things? Are you like DBS? I'm like, no. And it was quite a stilted conversation. And to me, it's either like thank God they didn't like get back in touch with me, because that would have been a bit awkward to be like, I'm not available anymore. But it's often what I see when people have a lot of anxiety, is that that's a way for them to kind of try and get some control. So I've had it before where I've been hired by somebody who's been very like, seemed to be intuitive. I had this, and luckily I could see it for what it is. I had somebody that hired me very recently and lived literally around the corner from me, got on really well with her. And then as soon as she'd paid me the deposit, she sent me this list of questions, and I was like, oh my goodness, these are red flags.
Yeah. Like
do I return
sort of thing.
Do I return her money right now? And I spoke to my coach, Lisa, and she was like, just like, this could be, she's just invested a lot in herself. For some people, that is very like, not what they're used to doing, and it can be very nerve-wracking, and it can throw your brain into like, what have I done? I've invested in myself. Am I worth it? And what it was is that her questions were like, if I have a stillbirth, do I get my money back? Like, to me, that is a massive red flag. But it turns out she was just having a bit of a meltdown. And I said to her, like, do you want to chat on the phone? And she did. And then she's just like, oh, I'm just feeling like really overwhelmed. I'm really sorry. And I was like, okay. But that was after she booked me. Whereas if I had that before, I'd be like, I don't know, I just don't know. Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tonight. I feel like I've got loads of stuff that I want to do tomorrow now. I've got my monthly list, my weekly list. I'm carving out a Friday. I'm doing all these things. I really hope you've enjoyed the call, and that you've found it helpful. We're going to carry on kind of exploring stuff between now and our call next Monday. So it's like alternate. So we've done an evening this time. So next time will be like is it 1 p.m? Yeah, 1 p.m. So they work like that. And I will share the recording, and I'll be in the WhatsApp group. And please feel free to use that if you've got any questions. I'm going to pop in there tomorrow to just answer some of Marie's questions about, she had something specific about how does she balance her NCT work with doulaing, which I think could be relevant for anybody that's got a kind of job they're doing, like a 3-day a week kind of job. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Has anyone got anything that they wanted to ask, or they want to, before they forget, or anything that maybe they want to explore in the group? Change it to gallery so I can see you all. Okay. Hope you all have a lovely evening. You've got a chance to chill out before you go to bed. And we'll speak soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.